you?
I'm doing good. How are you? It's so nice to see you. If we take advantage of some of this time, if either of you have specific questions,
yeah, and please, if you're just to be mindful of everybody's level of comfort, especially since this could turn into a larger group, please feel free to put questions in the chat. You don't have to raise your hand or unmute yourself or anything like that. So just wanted to offer that as well. And if there are no questions, Sarah and I have some things that we had outlined to talk about too.
Well, I do have a question. This is my opinion. I'm East Coast, so I'm wrapping up 7-month-old bedtime. So I would show my face, but I'm glad to be here. But I recently transitioned out of university counseling into private practice, and I'm trying to expand. My practice is completely digital, started in 2019. And so I've had an interest in the tech space. And so now I'm really kind of trying to expand my services. And I guess the baseline question for me is just where to start. I think sometimes it's a little bit intimidating seeing job postings and seeing these things that you would consider doing, but then recognizing that maybe the last 10 years you've really only been in one space. And so even just the bare minimum of where would one start with making that switch from a more clinical based work and services and transitioning to consulting, I guess.
Yeah, great. One of the things that I'm recognizing, apologies, Maya, absolutely, we want to answer that question. I think it actually could also be helpful if Sarah and I introduce ourselves just very quickly, since there's probably a lot of folks we haven't been able to meet. And then if it's all right with you, Maya, we can circle immediately back to answering that question.
Absolutely.
Okay. So sorry about that. You can see we're real pros here, right? Just because I'm talking, I'll keep talking. I'm Lauren Lee. I'm a clinical psychologist, and currently I'm the clinical product strategy lead at Headspace Health. I have been in industry for the majority of my career, actually only held one full-time clinical position, actually in college mental health at Stanford University, before pivoting into industry. And I did have a consulting company that I had established earlier in 2021. Now that I've joined Headspace Health full time, I have actually put that on hiatus, just given the overlap with lots of things that people are interested in consulting on. And just super excited that there was this much interest and hope that we can offer some insight and make it a little bit less intimidating to think about pivoting or transitioning into this area.
Thanks, Lauren. My name is Sarah Greenberg. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. And after years of practice and working in the nonprofit sector, I actually intentionally wanted to make a change and really work on very scalable interventions and approaches and program design. So I went back and got a second degree in prevention science at Harvard University, where I focused more on those very specific aspects: research, program design, evaluation, innovation. I started off my career now a long time ago as one of the first employees at BetterUp. It was tiny then. We didn't even have an office. We had no funding, just credit card debt. And in the interim between working at BetterUp, I spent about 3 years consulting at some of the mental health tech and healthcare unicorns, and then also at some smaller emerging startups. I'm now back, like Lauren. I love consulting, and because of opportunity that felt really exciting and important and meaningful, I'm back full-time at BetterUp as director of clinical design. That said, it just feels really nice to be here. Consulting, I think particularly consulting during the pandemic, and Lauren and I have talked about this, just felt so meaningful at a time when so many people were stepping up to try to come up with unique, scalable, innovative, quality affordable services, including therapists, right? Like not just consultants, but also like, how do I possibly manage the demand? So it just felt really meaningful to be doing this work at the time. And it feels great to be here, hopefully supporting other therapists who want to have a positive impact. Thanks for having me.
So to circle back to Maya's question, just to restate it, to make sure that both Sarah and I have clarity about what you were asking, and also for some folks that have joined since you posed the question, Maya, I believe like the focus of the question was around sort of how to start conceptualizing, I guess, what areas you might want to be a consultant in, especially given a background that has been more direct clinical work, but really maybe positioning yourself as a consultant within the intersection of kind of traditional mental health and clinical work, but also how it applies within tech and within industry. Can I just make sure that I heard that accurately?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Awesome. This is a great question to start off with. And mainly because this is one of the main things I did want to talk about with everybody. And that is around, I would encourage folks to go through an exercise really of what do you feel you can speak to versus not, with credibility and with a depth of experience. For better or for worse, my experience has been that we as clinicians in this space are seen a bit interchangeably, meaning that there isn't much nuance or understanding actually about the different backgrounds of, say, people that are trained more within a social work sort of orientation versus those that might be more from a marriage and family systems and therapies, right? There's a lack of understanding and knowledge about the skills that we bring to the table, as well as the focal areas. So I think it's really important that you get crisp for yourself more than anything, what areas you feel really comfortable to provide consultation in. And so like, this is an exercise that I went through when I was starting to figure out how to establish and market myself as a consultant. I looked at my previous job descriptions for roles that I had held. I also started to just sort of like write down for myself skills that I had sort of developed either on my own or I had been able to realize through the work that I was doing that wasn't part of the job description, because basically you're always doing more than your job description. And that really helped me hone in on my specialty areas for consultation, which are specific to building kind of like soup to nuts coaching and clinical operations within digital mental health. And then the intersection of both clinical programs and sort of like program implementation within digital mental health, but also product, down to like, what would behavioral science tell us about how we might phrase a question related to readiness to change, right? To get it like really super concrete. That was an exercise I went through, and it was very helpful because I became very aware for myself of what I actually was not comfortable consulting on. And I think it saved both people inbound interest, as well as when I was marketing myself, it cut out a lot of noise and sort of enabled me to say, I have a breadth of experience, but these are the depth areas that I think I can really support your company in. And Sarah, what do you think?
Lauren, I love that. First, I just love being in this group of therapists. That was such a wonderful reflection statement that you started with. And I really appreciate the question, Maya, just where to get started. I agree with really thinking through what skills you're bringing to the table. And especially because often in clinical environments, we're working with other subject matter experts, other clinicians, versus in a startup environment or an industry, we're often the only one in our role. And so the people we're working with are really looking to us to be the voice. So we want to be really confident in our areas of expertise. That said, I think that also a lot of us, because our skills have become so natural to who we are, we don't always recognize them. And so when I've done that exercise myself, it's been very helpful to think of my clinical and therapeutic skills, and then also check in with past colleagues, think about other types of work I've done. And I think in terms of a starting point, I think probably one that we all share, because Lauren and I have both been in the tech space for a number of years. And I think if we compare our list, at least for me, if I compare my list of skills when I started versus you just kind of get thrown in, and it's a fast pace and you learn as you go, right? Of course, being responsible and clear about the limits of your competence and expertise. But I think that one skill we all have that a lot of especially smaller startups tend to need is, what would a therapist do in this situation? And often you'll be paired with an interdisciplinary function. So let's say product, right? So you don't necessarily need to understand the product. You can still provide your perspective and be very clear about that. I would say starting off, what was really positive for me was starting with a really small startup. There were just a few employees. I actually started in a practitioner contractor role, but a small startup, there's so much need and everyone's moving so quickly that oftentimes you're very quickly brought into the fold, especially if you're willing to do more. So that really worked for me.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate that, especially the intentional exercise that you mentioned, and also just the concept of reflection and identifying, in the throes of your career, you accumulate these skills that maybe you haven't stopped to think about and recognize that you could offer. So that's very helpful. I appreciate the feedback.
Are there any sort of questions, I guess, that follow those same lines, just around kind of for folks that are pondering whether or not this could be a path forward for them, and how to kind of make that determination for yourself? Or any other questions too. And again, chat is available.
I have a question. Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'm a clinical health psychologist by training. I guess my follow-up question to that conversation is thoughts or recommendations in terms of those of us that are maybe earlier in terms of pondering, exploring, to kind of dip a toe in the water, or the idea of sort of consulting like on the side to what we're doing currently, as opposed to doing something more full-time. If you could speak to that, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Sure, Sarah, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. What first comes to mind is just how great it is that therapists in tech exists, so that there actually is a place that we can go, right? A Slack group that brings together the different opportunities. I love it, because I think, again, when Laura and I started, I don't think that existed.
We were just flying by the seat of our pants.
And so having that list, I think what really helps dipping your toe in part-time, often when organizations are creating contractor or consultant roles, they have in mind a certain persona. So one persona is a therapist who is also maintaining a private practice or doing other types of work. And so, they don't write it so explicitly, but sometimes in a description of what someone is looking for, you'll see a little hint like, can complement your private practice. Or if you decide to reach out and look into the opportunity, that's a question that you can ask in the very first conversation. And it's likely, maybe I'm being too generous, but possible they've already thought that through. I think another interesting possibility for dipping one's toe in and just getting a sense if you like the environment is finding a company who's a startup whose values you feel very aligned with, whose approach you feel very aligned with, and considering an early on contractor practitioner type role, I think is another widely available way to start to dip your toe in. What would you say, Lauren?
Yeah, no, I love that, Sarah. That's one of the recommendations that I'll make for folks, not even for consulting really, but like also just people that are thinking or pondering transitioning into tech or into industry is taking a role, because you get so much exposure to really a system that you likely have not experienced before. And it's my own personal experience was that it was really overwhelming. And at the same time, it provided all the signals around like sink or swim that I needed to figure out if it was the right fit for me. I think one of the ways in which I have seen a lot of folks start to get exposure and dip their toes in is around, providing subject matter expertise for certain topics around content. Like content writing, or offering a scientifically, rigorous background, right? Or article that then gets translated, which is usually what happens by a copywriter within a company. So it can be another nice way to think about flexing your skills. Right, the skills that you have from your background and training, and even your lived experience of being clinicians, and how that might look to translate it right into what one might experience in a digital product, or how you translate what we maybe know from an academic or professional kind of lens into something that is more layperson or member facing friendly. That can be a really important exercise, because I think, to your point, Sarah, when you are consulting, it's always of benefit to understand, or at least have familiarity with, the organizational structures and the functional structures within which your work and your consultation is going to be applied, right? And that can feel a little bit like a black box in the beginning. Right? Like if we're throwing out terms like product org, content,
member facing,
right? Member facing. And 6 years ago, I would have been like, I have no idea what anybody's talking about if they say these things to me. Right. So I would encourage, start small, like Sarah's offering. I think actually one of my own personal first, paid consulting gigs was for pre-seed. It was a pre-seed company, and honestly, the skills that I leveraged there were certainly around like aspects of I think clinical programs development and operational kind of like guidance, but even more foundationally, some of it was more to, hey, founder, this is how you interact with clinicians. And this is the language that we speak. And whatever your current understanding is, be prepared to have that be widened in terms of how you see clinicians and how you embed them across your org, not just as operators, because that actually creates profound gaps in an experience for members as well as for the people providing the service. But it doesn't even have to be subject matter expertise. Like part of it can be like befriend a clinician before you decide that you want to build a mental health company, so that you have a better grasp and understanding of what it is that you're signing up for as a founder or as a leader within this org.
But don't befriend a clinician and try to get free consulting out of them.
Oh yeah. No, that's not that.
But do befriend.
We don't do that. And actually, can I speak to that for just a moment? And I see we have some questions. So the only thing that I'll say is, and if we wanted to dive into this a little bit more later, one of the ways that I tried to market myself was actually by doing like free 20-minute discovery-based calls. This comes from my coaching, my coaching background. And the number of people that asked for additional time that were not open to that being paid time, staggering. So I think like you have to have your own boundaries around that and decide when you say no, even if you're worried that another opportunity may not come along, it will. But you've got to respect yourself and your time and your expertise.
Yeah, plussing on that, it's striking. It's really striking. It's certainly not everyone, but there's enough that it makes you wonder.
Yes, or be horrified, either way. I want to acknowledge that I actually received a question through direct message, so not everybody can see it, and just sort of being respectful of order of questions coming in. If you'll permit me, Carlene, and also I think Sarah, to read that question out loud so that we can handle that first. The question we have here is, hi there, I'm a PhD candidate, and I'd be most interested to hear about path to getting to this sort of career. So I think the question is maybe around how might somebody that's just coming out of training start to develop skills or experiences that would enable them to consult. That's how I'm reading that, at least. And if you're still on the call and that's not what you meant, I apologize. Feel free to correct me. Okay. Yeah, I think like do anything and everything. That's not a really like fulfilling answer, and it's certainly not tactical enough. But like what I would say is, I would encourage folks to not feel constrained by what your program trained you in or what they set you up for. Because there isn't a program around right now that I'm aware of that has a track focused on training clinicians and mental health professionals to go specifically into tech or industry in that way. There may be opportunities, but like there's no blueprint, right? There's no sort of like program. And so it's got to be, for my experience at least, it was a mix between, I always knew that I wanted to leverage tech to support interventions. I didn't have enough familiarity with how I might be able to do that. And so the first role that I took in industry, once I had decided to sort of pivot, it actually wasn't the ideal role for me or like where I wanted to be, but I considered it a paid internship. And a much better paid internship than, postdoc was, or actual internship. Like went in and really just tried to absorb and learn as much as I could about industry, right? And that's not like paid time. It's not like job necessarily things, but I sort of use that as an opportunity to just expand the breadth of skills. And not even the breadth of skills, but just learning how to really intentionally and tactically apply the skills that I had in a very new space and in a very new sector for me. Yeah. And what about for you, Sarah? Anything you'd like to add on to that?
I think you said it well, that there's no specific go-to blueprint. I love that. I'm curious if anyone on this call, maybe, shout it out or throw it into the chat, has had experiences or come across any programs that seem like they would be helpful. Because I definitely see new things popping up all the time. I'm personally not as aware, since certainly there wasn't a blueprint in my path, and I haven't seen many, but I'm curious if there are any exceptions that anyone has come across. Yeah, that's awesome. Some postdocs.
We do. We've definitely, I think we've seen them emerge in the last couple of years of creating these postdoc opportunities. Certainly. I'm going to be transparent. There's a lot of variability in what that means. And so I would encourage anybody that was interested in a postdoc to get real grounded in what the work is like, what skills actually you'll be able to achieve, because not too dissimilar from the way it works in academia. You just want to make sure that there's as much in it for you as it is for them when you're holding those positions. So yeah, I've seen the postdocs, although I still don't see a ton of them around. And then, you know, there are companies that are also, oh, awesome. Thank you, Jessica.
Cool.
That's amazing. And we need more academicians like that. Oh, so sorry. I lost my train of thought. I apologize. I'll stop speaking.
I like what you said, Satya, about having a mental health counseling degree and a coaching certification. I have found it very handy and helpful to have multiple hats that I can put on. You know, wearing my clinical counseling therapy hat isn't ideal for every contract that I've done. Being a certified coach has been very helpful, especially, and this is true for Lauren too, we've both worked a lot in the coaching space, a lot in, you know, maybe someone trying to address what could be seen as clinical outcomes, but through very non-clinical approaches, right? And so in those cases, I really want another hat, another lens that I can, you know, see this work through. I also became certified as a mental health first aid instructor. So again, not, you know, not directly applicable, I think, to any of my work, but again, just another lens. Some of my background, you know, even grad school is peer counseling. And just, you know, again, just wearing different types of hats. I think, Satya, you make such a good point about getting credentials so that you can have those other lenses and feel good about it.
And I'm just going back to the chat. We have a bunch of questions, so very exciting. And I'm also going to just be mindful of time because it is 5:01. If it's all right, actually, with you, I may have to select, Sarah, one question just so that there's equity for other folks that have asked questions too. And what are things, just sort of looking at your questions, I wondered this question: is there anything that you wish you knew before getting into consulting? That could be valuable, maybe, right, for folks that are pondering right now, like how to make actionable anything that we're talking about. There's that one. And I think we may have touched on some aspects of this with answering other questions, some of the other questions that you posed, Sarah. Yeah, what do I wish I had known? Oh, gosh. To be honest, I wish that I had known that it wasn't, that there was a lot of like pounding the pavement that was involved in it. I was not a consultant necessarily that just had a ton of inbound interest. And so there is a fair amount of marketing and advertising and really sort of unique ways of getting your name out there that I sort of learned on the fly or experimented with just cause. So it wasn't like, and maybe this is similar with private practice too, right? Like you can't just hang the shingle and be like, come. like there is work that you need to do to build demand generation, so to speak. That's another big, fun, techie industry term. Demand generation for your services, and to make it known that this is what you're doing. And so, like for me, what that looked like was building out my own website, creating a business page on LinkedIn for the consulting firm, doing self-promotion here on Therapists in Tech, or reaching out to all of the professional colleagues and contacts and letting them know that I had a consulting business and asking them to funnel folks my way. And then a lot of the support that I've actually received has been through just networking with people in Therapists in Tech and them tagging me on questions that people ask, or areas that come up where my expertise could be valuable. But I didn't have a great awareness of that prior to actually launching into consulting.
I love that. I'll just add quickly, because I want to get to these other questions. Being discerning, this is something Lauren and I also talked about. So really being discerning. I know there was an example on the Therapists in Tech thread of, a founder who was clearly not respecting clinicians' time and expertise. And so just being really discerning, right? When I have a first conversation, just really, trusting myself. You won't always know right away, but trusting myself to track, okay, am I aligning with these values? Do I feel respected in this engagement? Do I feel respected in this contract? So being really discerning. And I think as I got more experienced, I got to quicker know when the answer was no. Having a community, now Therapists in Tech exists. Again, when I started, it didn't, but really having a community where I could get the support that I wanted. It's okay not to know. Like if I went back and said, and beginner consultant, Sarah, just it's okay not to know. There is such a learning curve in the startup tech industry space. And it was never a problem to not know. No one expected me to know product or design. Yet I felt bad, right? I carried an extra weight. I felt like, like it was an inside job. But that's one thing I wish I would have felt more confident in starting out.
Okay, I'm just going to make sure that I'm tracking the questions here, and please call out if I accidentally do skip over anybody's question. But next question that I see here is around, do consultants usually take on multiple jobs with multiple companies? This is a great tactical question. For me, yes, with the caveat being that I get very, very crisp about what the scope of work is. And make very, very clear actually what my current engagements are. Because obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but there's very little differentiation in the space. And so because of that, you can find yourself in situations where you're providing consultation on the same thing to companies that are direct competitors of each other. And you actually do need to have that awareness so that you can recuse yourself from opportunities that might challenge your ethics.
Agreed. Yes, and nothing additional to add there.
And that's hard. I'm just going to say that is hard because, well, just to get really tactical here about a response to how you might mitigate that. I always have a statement of work in terms of a contract. Everything is in writing because I want to make sure that I am protected. And I also want to make sure that the terms of the engagement are incredibly crystal clear for the company that I'm consulting with. It's not fun to have to build out some of that stuff, the administrative stuff, but doing that on the front end is going to save you so much sanity once you're actually in flight, because and I think Sarah's time consulting was a little bit different than mine in that it was a full-time gig for you for a period of time, whereas for me I was always sort of doing it as a side kind of hustle. But would you agree with that? Just sort of like trying to get some of the administrative, financial, taxi type pieces established so you're not doing it in tandem.
Yeah, I said I had nothing to add. I lied. You just made me think of two things that were game changing for me. I One, met with a lawyer to understand the types of contracts I was seeing. Often you'll see a very strong compete clause such that, okay, you can't work with anyone else who does tech, right? And that's, depending where you live, it's not binding, it's not, there are non-compete clauses. So just speaking with a lawyer was really helpful. So I could know, what I had to do legally. And then ethically, I think with almost every contract, I had a conversation. So most, like Lauren said, most organizations prefer you don't work with direct competitors. So I would have that conversation. As a consultant, it's expected that you have a set of skills, it's your livelihood. You're going to work with different types of companies who do potentially similar things. But I would have a conversation, is there, what are your boundaries? What are your preferences? And sometimes, and you don't have to do this, right? You can just go with the legal piece. But for me, it felt a little bit better. And sometimes there were, just a small set. I was surprised how often there was a small set of companies someone just didn't want me to work with. And in most cases, I was okay with it. And again, you don't have to do that. It was just something that I found was helpful. So the legal aspect and then the conversation. By the way, apologies for my dog. We just want to remind you that it's, hasn't changed from 2022. We still have our whole lives in the Zoom, lest you forgot.
And I just wanted to also acknowledge, Amanda, that you have your hand raised, and I'm so terribly sorry I can't actually track where chronologically that occurred. So apologies there, but I see you, and we will absolutely get to your question. So a couple people have asked a little bit about compensation, and I do want to address this because I think it's sticky, is what I will say. And it's sticky in part because consulting in this way is still really nascent, right? If you consider like established industries or sectors, it's widely variable. I believe, actually, did we not publish or have intentions? Yeah, we published a piece about what to expect or how to sort of create ranges for both consulting as well as roles, different leveled roles. So please check that out. And if you reach out to me, I'm happy to send you that link. But Therapists in Tech did publish an article about that. There are, you don't actually have to hang your own shingle to be a consultant. You can actually work for consulting firms who seek you out because of your background and skill set, and where you do get the full pass-through amount that you request. Thank you, Ash. Oh, okay. Haven't done it on consulting ranges. It's really hard. I'm going to be honest. And I actually find that a lot of people devalue themselves and do not set an hourly rate that is commensurate with their skill set and what they bring to the table. So I'm actually not comfortable right now quoting my hourly rate. I don't know, Sarah, if you are or not. I don't want to put you on the spot. But I think what I would say is those sorts of conversations, always happy to have them one-on-one with folks to help them sort of figure out where they want to set their price, and also realize that just because somebody doesn't believe that your skills or time are worth the price that you set, that does not equal the price that you set and validating or invalidating that. Okay. So like I strongly encourage, oh, thank you. Thank you so much for posting these resources. Really appreciate it. But yeah, it's pretty variable, I guess, is like the TLDR. And don't devalue yourself, because others are just waiting and chomping at the bit to do it for you. If you don't have anything to add, Sarah, then let's see here. And Carlene, thank you so much for posting your question. I apologize that, we weren't able to call on you earlier. The question here is around strategic language to support tailoring, structuring resumes, LinkedIn, in a way that tech companies can translate, that they see the need or the value that you might provide. You want to kick us off, Sarah?
Yes, I was reading through. So, Lauren, do you mind just repeating the question? I was reading through this whole great list while you were saying it.
Oh yeah, no problem. The question was around concrete examples or resources for tailoring or structuring language that one could put on a resume or LinkedIn that would make them attractive to a tech company for consulting, and really trying, the struggle being, how do you balance being strategic while also very authentic about what you bring to the table?
Such a great question. Yeah, I think that there could be a really interesting perspective, doing the exercise that Lauren spoke about and really identifying your clear areas of expertise. And then potentially, even if you know someone, perhaps there's someone in this group who has some level of expertise in SEO. I haven't done that personally, but I know a little investment in SEO can go a long way if that's the primary way that you want to reach clients. At some point, I started in my headline when I was consulting full time, wrote mental health consultant. And that did seem to make some difference. That's a good question. I'm curious what you have to add there, Lauren.
Yeah, I just said I was a consultant as well. That's a very non-inelegant answer, but yeah, I think there's two things. Yeah, maybe, and so this is a more thoughtful and less glib answer, I apologize, which is take what I almost would do in some strange way is think about some of the more technical skills that you have that you probably obtained when you were, doing your training, maybe even if you're not using them day to day on the job right now, and think about how that might be scaled, or examples of how that could be scaled that would be important for a company. So here's a real concrete example. I for my dissertation, had to do longitudinal data analysis. And one of the things, right, with outcomes generation or evidence generation for these tech companies is a lot of the times they're just looking at pre-post, right? They're not looking at sort of like individual change over time, even though that's the actual evidence that one needs to, say, go after the payer market. So I might have written something like that as being, depth of analytical skills to support evidence and claims generation, as an example. So using their language, but again, sort of looking to the skills that I have that I know are extensible to that. And if you don't know, that's when really it's a great time to reach out to a mentor or somebody that could be a mentor through Therapists in Tech, and or joining some of the fireside chats that we have set up as well. Or I believe we have 2 or 3 upcoming, just to hear how other people kind of have framed some of their skills as well. And I'm so sorry. I'm just coming back here to take a look. Amanda, would you actually like to share your question with us to make sure that we have time for that?
Right, sure. Thank you. I'm Amanda. I'm licensed clinical social worker. Sorry, I'm getting over COVID. I'm outside of DC. So I have a couple of questions. One, you just mentioned mental health consultant. When I research mental health consultant, something else comes up. I see I guess behavioral health consultant. It talks about individuals who are working in hospitals, providing some sort of therapy or counseling for, patients in hospitals. So I guess for me personally, I have to look it up some more, because when I look it up, it's something completely different comes up. And then when it comes to startups, what kinds are we talking about? And how do we find those different kind of tech startups that, might be interested in what I provide as a clinician? I'm also a DEI practitioner. So I like that you said, these things provide us a different lens, but I'm just wondering, where would I find those kinds of startups that are attracted to what I do?
I can take the first part of that, Lauren, which is I just want to say off the bat, Yes, Amanda, when you look up a mental health consultant or related terms that you probably hear us saying, it comes up with something very different. And the benchmarks that you see online are way off. So just want to name that loud and clear for everyone to hear. And I have not, when I was doing work, I did not find online, even being an obsessive searcher, did not find online benchmarks that worked or matched. So I think the best bet is this is a growing field. The demand is extraordinarily high. I'm going to let Lauren speak to the rest, but I can specifically say with DEI that the demand is very high. And so I think just like that means the price should be a lot higher than probably anything you're seeing online. Lauren, would you speak to the second part of the question, how to find, or any other perspective?
Yeah. You know, I don't know that we've done it through Therapists in Tech again, but I do know that we had actually a reverse demo day at one point when we were sort of more foundationally forming, where actually very early stage pre-seed or seed funded startups came and pitched to us. and you know, if they were looking for consultants, they would share that and you could reach out to them. I think we do highlight jobs as well as I think some contract or consulting type opportunities within that channel of Therapists in Tech. And gosh, I really hate to say this because it sounds like so industry, but it's also just like, it's just true. It's just true. It's trite, but it's true. Networking and the comfort with self-promotion and engaging. Basically, here's how I would put it. I never say no to a call. Now, generally, it's just one call, but I'll never say no to a call. to network, to sort of also, you know, even if it's not to actually plug into a consulting role, I just find it fascinating all the different things that are getting cooked up in the space. And you know, by having these conversations, yes, it may lead right to a consulting role, but also even broader than that, you can start to get a sense of the headwinds in the space and sort of like, where is it now? And sort of how are people thinking about where it's going? And what could be great about that for a consultant, right, is that with all of the startups that are coming, two things. Most of them don't have a great sense of product market fit. So exactly where within this very crowded field are they placing themselves? And what is the specific challenge that they're solving? And then I think the other thing that you can speak to, right, by taking all of the knowledge that you're getting from these networking calls or from exposing yourself in these ways to different folks, is around themes and categories of challenge so that you can market yourself. So here's one that I think is sorely lacking, and it was the impetus for me to set up my own consulting firm. Quality and safety. And the fact that that's kind of loosey-goosey in this space because it's just not as regulated because it's more nascent than in traditional practice. But like that was actually the foundation of my skin in the game for consulting, is that I feel that we have a responsibility to protect consumers and we have the responsibility to protect each other in this space. And so you can certainly do that by working for a specific company, but as a consultant, one of the powers that you wield is that you get to work with a lot of companies, which means you get to proselytize messages that are really, really foundational and important to providing safe, high quality services to consumers. Going back to the questions again, I'm so sorry. I can multitask, I swear, but it's also almost 5:30. How have the for the different types of consultation engagements that we've had, how have the responsibilities varied across those? I think is one question. And then the second part of the question is around, I think, more the business, the business parts of it, like how important is it to have yourself buttoned up from like a legal and business and tax kind of perspective. So is there one of those that is more fun for you to answer, Sarah, or that you're more interested in answering?
I think I'm interested in answering how responsibilities have varied. Though, Lauren, I also really want to hear your answer. So I'm going to make mine brief and then hear what your experience has been. My experience has been a great deal of variability. So there are certain organizations you might work with who hire you on to do a single task. So for example, content, right? Lauren shared that as one approach that can be a great entry. If you enjoy doing content, can be a great entry point. Sometimes, and for me, this type of work happened a little bit later in my journey, but someone might bring you in to design an entire soup to nuts program, right? Or an entire soup to nuts strategy. Sometimes it's research or analytics or data, and it will be a very specific role. Other times, someone might bring you in and they don't necessarily know what they want. They actually need guidance from you. And I think for me, it's important not to demonize that. I think that's where a lot of the therapy skills come in, right? Asking the right questions, really finding out, they might say, we just want this to be the best experience. Okay, what would lead to that, right? Really helping them gain clarity. And then of course, if you already know what you want to do, right? You can set boundaries based on, your scope or your agreed upon scope. Or if you're just looking to maybe get your feet wet and all of it is within your areas of expertise and competence, maybe that's a really positive thing. The other thing that happens very frequently, in my experience, is you might be brought in for one thing. I see Lauren already nodding. And then the scope just buds like the biggest flower you've ever seen in your life. And that's another really common thing that happens. What's your experience with that, Lauren?
Yeah, for me, and this is maybe some of my control and OCD tendencies flaring up, but I created kind of different definitions of engagement, I suppose, and all with the same kind of hourly rate, but like I would have what I would offer kind of is like think tank style sessions, which is I don't actually prepare for them. You sort of come in, you've got this list of questions. I will try to answer them to the best of my ability / directionally point you towards where you might be able to find the answer. And then a second tier kind of service was around like a scoped statement of work. So I can name like writing a standard operating procedure for crisis and other types of critical clinical events, right? That's really well defined. There's that statement of work, that's part of the contract, right? And so we don't kind of go outside of those lines. And then there was a third arm that I never got to realize. And so if anybody wants to do this, it's sorely needed. So giving away an idea here. I wanted to spin up a service that was basically a package. And the package would be going into any enterprise company, doing a needs assessment of like mental health services and needs of their employees, and then helping them to evaluate all of the different companies that were approaching them to partner as being part of the mental health and wellness benefits. It's a crazy space to navigate. Benefits administrators have no idea what the differentiation is or what's going to fit. They just desperately need a solution. And so it's really an area where I would encourage folks to seriously consider thinking about like specializing in for consultation, because it does tend to be seasonal, right? With open enrollment and sales cycles. And it does not have to be proprietary because the needs of any organization will be shifting, right? As you move from organization to organization, and who is doing sales proposals or pitches to them will also vary. So it's another way to kind of think about utilizing all of your skill sets, right? Around active listening, the ability to hear all of the subtext, and then create recommendations for how to close those gaps or solve those challenges. But I never actually got to see it through. So I can't say whether or not there's a demand for it. I can just say that I think it's sorely needed in the space right now. And then for the legal part of it, I personally think it's really important. A couple things, just recognizing time. I established an LLC. I actually used a package through LegalZoom, so I did not hire my own lawyer, but I used LegalZoom. I established an LLC. I purchased a different professional liability insurance specifically for consulting, and included errors and omissions as an add-on. That's not a standard part of professional liability insurance. So depending on what sort of work you're doing, you may want to consider that. And then in terms of tax, I had the benefit of my husband actually formerly had set up an LLC. So I listened to him, and we'll see what happens. Haven't gotten audited yet, so that's good. But yes, I think it's important that you, especially because of how this all works, they're not withholding taxes when they pay you. So you actually have to have in your mind that you need to withhold yourself about 30% of whatever you're making from consulting so that you can pay your business taxes. And depending on the state that you're in, like California is a good example of this, minimally you have to pay $800 a year, even if you never receive any income through your consulting business. That's the way that California business tax law works. So you do have to get pretty familiar and savvy about how to navigate all of that, or, face potentially some negative consequences down the line.
Agreed. I used QuickBooks and then also had a accountant because the tax difference, and it does vary somewhat state by state, but it even when it can be a lot when it comes to tax time. And also I think that going back to the rate, there's a lot of expenses that consultants have that employees don't have. So that's another thing to really think about when you're setting your rates.
Yes.
There might be a reason to start with lower rates if there's a certain type of experience you're looking to get, right? Or if you're getting a unique benefit from it, but there really are a lot of expenses and details to think about. The tax.
And you can write a lot of those off.
Yes, right.
As well. So
Yep.
Just like keep that in mind, but that means pretty meticulous accounting and receipt tracking and all of that, just in case you do get audited. So throwing that out there. It's the less fun and less glamorous pieces of consulting, right? It's just the infrastructure development. I'm realizing that I don't know how it happened, but we're already at time for the session today. I'm hoping that I think we were able to answer most people's questions. Although I do see one that we weren't able to. And Mike, I don't know if you're still on the line here. Please reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to have a conversation about this. Or actually, maybe you can post it in the Ask channel on Therapists in Tech, and I can respond there. Sarah can respond as well, and then everybody can kind of have visibility into that. Would that work?
Yeah, will do. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming. We'll have a recording of this queued up hopefully within the next week or so here. And at least speaking for myself, if you do have any questions that come up, please feel free to direct message me on Therapists in Tech. I'm always there. I will be honest, I may not get to it same day, but I am very good about responding to Slack messages. So happy to entertain any of those inbound questions.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the world and your interest in expanding it.
Yes, it's so desperately needed. And our time is coming to really have the impact that I know we all entered this space to have. I mean, we have it already, sorry, on the one-to-one level, but yes, even broader. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.